Bo called me, asking me questions about what I had talked about either Sunday morning or Sunday night. I tried to present a timeline for Nehemiah. And some of the questions he asked told me he's really paying attention and checking me out. And I said, Bo, let me get back and study this out, and I'll show you Wednesday night. So if you see Bo, you just have to tell him, boy, it was great. You should have been there and heard this. And I was hoping he'd be here to see it, but he might get this anyway. So here's what I did. I went back and made a list of the kings of Babylon and the kings of Persia to show when these events took place. And it's not as complicated a chart, it's a little more straightforward. And these are dates BC, so it starts off, 612. Now think of those dates, like 612, that means that's 612 years before the New Testament. All right? We say before Christ is what we say, but even Christ is, I think, at 3 or 4 AD, because they got the time thing all mixed up. So I'm not the only one that gets this confused, am I? And also, when you look at different sources, you'll come up with different numbers, which is just so confusing on the different lists and different numbers. And so sometimes they leave out certain kings, and sometimes some of these numbers they may not know exactly right. But here's a general idea of what took place from the downfall of Jerusalem until the rise of the Greeks. And we're going to do this real quick, okay? There's a fellow named Nabopolassar. He became king in Babylon. His son was Nebuchadnezzar. As Nabopolassar prepared to attack Jerusalem, Nabopolassar died, and Nebuchadnezzar finished that work in 605. So in 605 BC, there was the first deportation, and that's where they took away Daniel and his 3 friends. And then in 598 BC, there's a second deportation. And this time Ezekiel went with those. They're coming into Babylon. There's a second deportation of people out of Jerusalem. Ezekiel went with them that time. And then Jerusalem is destroyed in 586 BC. And that's where we're talking about the days of Jeremiah. And he talks about that destruction where the temple is destroyed, the city walls are destroyed, and the city is laid waste. Well, it kind of, you say, well, they went off into Babylon, but it took place over a period of about 20 years, 15, 20 years. 605 to about 20 years that it took place over. Now, after Nebuchadnezzar, the king that arose in Babylon is evil Merodach. I think of Evel Knievel, Okay, well, he became the king. His name was Evil. But he didn't last long. Nebuchadnezzar became king after him, and then Labash Marduk, and he didn't last long. He didn't last a year. And Nabonidus became king. Okay? After Nabonidus, Belshazzar. Actually, Nabonidus, according to secular history, served all the way to the downfall of Babylon. But his son, Belshazzar, at the last, was ruling with him. You'll recognize that name, Belshazzar. He's the one that saw the finger writing on the wall. Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. And that night, Babylon fell. And I'll just keep moving. I go into that story, but I'll keep moving. Okay, so Babylon falls to Persia. Now, let's go to the Persian kings. Cyrus became king. And as it was prophesied by Isaiah under Cyrus, shortly after he became king, Zerubbabel returns to Jerusalem and begins to rebuild the temple. And then after Cyrus, there's this man named Cambyses Gotmata. You can tell he didn't last long. Darius the First became king, and it was in the days of Darius the First that the temple was dedicated. We're reading about these things in the book of Ezra. And then Ahasuerus became king. History knows him as Xerxes the First. But this is King Ahasuerus, and this is where we read the story of Esther. He takes Esther to be his queen during his reign. After Ahasuerus he is assassinated. After he is assassinated, Artaxerxes the First became king in Persia. And it's then that Ezra came to Jerusalem to lead spiritual reforms. And it's also during the times of Artaxerxes now, in the 12th year of Artaxerxes, that we read about Nehemiah going before the king, asking, can I go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the wall? Okay? Now, there's more. There's more. Here we go. Then Xerxes II becomes king. And then Sogdanos, and that's all I know about him, Darius II becomes king. And this is somewhat speculative here, but it's believed that it is during the reign of Darius II that Nehemiah was actually written. And then not long after that Nehemiah dies. And then another Artaxerxes II becomes king. And again, there's some question here. It's thought this is the time of Malachi, and that brings the Old Testament to a close. There's more. There's more. And this is told of in Daniel, that these things are going to take place in prophecy. After Artaxerxes, there's Artaxerxes III, and then Artaxerxes IV, and then Darius III, and then Persia falls to the Greeks. Alexander the Great rules the world. He rules over that Persian kingdom beginning in the year 331, according to this source. Now, all the sources don't give you the same number. But then Alexander the Great dies in 323. History tells us about this. He's about, in his early 30s, 30, 33, somewhere, right, about 30 years old, in Egypt. He could conquer the world, but he didn't conquer his liquor. He drank himself to death. And as he lay dying, his generals stood around his bed where he was dying and asked him, to whom do you leave the kingdom? And he looked up and said, to the strongest. Well, that was quite a turmoil. That kingdom divided into 4 kingdoms. And then after that, the dispersion of the Greeks and all just made it easy for the Romans to come on in one at a time. And we come to the New Testament time where there is Rome. I must be tapping that. I'm radioactive tonight. Maybe I'm, because I'm in front of these mics. Wonder if that will help. Okay? All right. So anyway, I say all that just as a way to kind of put Nehemiah in a context. We're looking right here close to the close of the Old Testament. Now, I hope that's not buzzing every time I say something wrong. Okay, I'll try to get this right. You think this might be doing it? Did I get close to it? I don't know. Wait a minute. Watch this. I'll put this down here. Maybe that'll do it. All right? Now we'll see what happens. Okay. Let's look at Nehemiah chapter 3. Here's where they're going to build the wall. I've got this divided into 42 crews and 10 gates. So as we read this, we're going to read about the crews. They went counterclockwise here. We're going to go counterclockwise around the wall till we go all the way around Jerusalem. We'll start at the sheep gate. We're going to work our way all the way around Jerusalem and come all the way back. At the end of the chapter, we'll be back at the sheep gate. Now that's counterclockwise, going around that wall, looking at it from above. Bo asked me, he said, how long was that wall that they built? Well, I couldn't find that directly. I did find that the wall enclosed about 50 acres. Hey, I'm an engineer. I know numbers. I know how to estimate. If you did 50 square acres, you'd have about a mile around that. But it wasn't square. It was a little zigzagged bit. So I'm going to say it's about a mile and a half. And that'd be a pretty good estimate then for the wall. Between a mile and a half anyway of wall that they built to enclose those 50 acres. All right? Now let's look at the crews. I want you to imagine trying to organize 40 crews that are to work together on that wall. You know, that is really quite a task. You get 40, what if you had 40 crews working under you? I mean, you can just imagine all the questions and the confusion and the supplies and the things going on with 40 crews working on this wall. Let's look at the chapter, and I may not read all of these names. Now, some of the names are tongue twisters here, and they're not common names, so that would be confusing. But I'm going to try to point out some things about those crews that we're looking at and see what we can learn. We start with the high priest. Elisha, the high priest, rose up with his brethren, the priest. Started with the religious men. The men that were the priest got to work. If I was at a preacher school talking to a bunch of preachers, I tell them, I said, now look, when the church goes to work, you ought to be out front doing it. You know, provide the leadership there. Elders, they ought to get out front and do the work. These were the people that the people would look to for their religious leadership, and they ought to be out there working. And so we begin with the priest, and they're building the sheep gate, and they sanctified it. That's what priests do. They sanctify things, don't they? Set that apart. Make this a holy gate. So what is the sheep gate? And looking at the location, I tell you, a lot of this construction detail and all we're going to look at may sound a little dry. If you are an archaeologist, this might be your favorite chapter in the book of Nehemiah. You can study Nehemiah chapter 3 and then start digging around and go, this must have been the sheep gate. And so it's over there near the temple. It's thought to be the gate where the sacrifices would come through and they'd bring them into Jerusalem there at the sheep gate. And so they set up the doors of it even to the lower tower of Mia, and they sanctified it into the tower of Hananiel. So they're working counterclockwise now around the city of Jerusalem. Second crew. Any question on that first crew? Okay, the second crew. Next to them builded the men of Jericho. And I don't know if I located all of the cities, but it's interesting to me that people from Jericho says they're going to build that wall. We're going to go help them. We want to be part of that. The Jews of Jericho made their way up that road and up that mountain and says, we're going to help you build that wall. It's not just the inhabitants of Jerusalem, is it? This meant something. This was important to all of the Jews. And so, oh, I bet it could have been. And the temple is there.
They had that connection with David, I guess.
Yes. They knew they were the Jews. And they wanted their city to do well. And they wanted that city. So we're going to see Jews from different places. Gibeah is going to be mentioned. Mizpah is going to be mentioned. And so it's not just Jerusalem. The Jews from Judea and the region around about came to Jerusalem during this period to help build that wall. Is there a lesson for us? Well, yes. Yeah, I tell you what, if Bonner's having a gospel meeting, I want to be there. We help each other, don't we? When Central is trying to figure out what they're going to do with a preacher and get a preacher, I'm praying for them. And if they have a way to welcome him, I want to be part of that. We want to help our brethren accomplish their work, don't we? And so the men of Jericho, they come up to help work on the wall. And I missed a crew, so all my crews are off now. Sorry about that. There's crew 2 and crew 3 here. From now on, the crew, you're going to have to add 1 to each of my crews. But it says, and next to them bidded Zucar, the son of Imri. So I would have called that another crew. See if I got that. I may have done that. No. So that's actually crew 4. Okay. Not perfect, but you get the point here. I'm going to go by my numbers here, but you get the point. We'll call it crew 3. Crew 3. The fish gate did the son of Hananisa build, who also laid the beams thereof, and set up the doors thereof, and the locks thereof, and the bars thereof. This is the second gate. Actually the 4th crew. But the second gate. And the fish gate. What do you think why would they call that a fish gate? What would you think? Well, they sell fish there. There's your fish market. But people bringing fish to Jerusalem, that's if you want fish, go to the fish gate. You know, that'd be their fish market probably, and that's what they said in the commentaries. That would be the gate they'd go if they went to get the fish that people would bring to Jerusalem. Come down from Galilee with a load of fish, go to the fish gate, and that's where you go to the fish market there. All right, crew 4. Next to them repaired Miramoth, the son of Uriah, the son of Koz. I want you to remember them. Now, I know these names are hard to remember. I want you to remember them, and I'll show you why in a little while. They're going to show up again. Okay? All right, let's go to the next crew. Crew 5. Miramoth, the son of Uriah, the son of Koz. Crew 6. This is still in verse 4. And next to them repaired Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, the son of Meshes Zabil. All right. Crew 7. Next to them repaired Zadok, the son of Baana. Let's keep going. Around the city now. And next to them the Tekoites. Who was from Tekoa? What Bible character comes from Tekoa? Okay, do you know where Tekoa is? It's one of those towns south of Jerusalem like Bethlehem. It's kind of between Bethlehem and the Dead Sea somewhere. The prophet of Tekoa. Little old country town, poor place. He was a dresser of sycamore trees. Did I tell you who he was? Amos. No, it's Amos. That little old country boy coming out, I was neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but God sent me here to prophesy to you, and thus saith the Lord. He was saying that up in Bethel. I mean, that'd be kind of like somebody from Warren County going to Chicago, straighten them out. That'd be kind of like what that'd be. Amos the prophet of Tekoa. Well, again, folks from out of town. But look at these Tekoa. It's a little old town, not much better off than Nazareth. And yet, look what it says. Their nobles put not there next to the work of the Lord. Listen, they're from Tekoa. That's a nothing place. And they thought they were too good to work on that wall. Well, they were not too good. I could not hardly imagine what a noble of Tekoa would be. That'd be sort of like the mayor of Viola. Okay? I mean, that's not much, is it? I mean, I'm the mayor of Viola. I'm not going to have to do that kind of work. Well, that's not. And here the nobles of Tekoa. Well, they're not going to do that work. So that's kind of bad on them, isn't it? And it doesn't speak well of Tekoa. But the men of Tekoa, they went up there and did the work. Crew 9. Gate 3. The Old Gate. I don't know why it's called the Old Gate. The Old Gate. Repaired Jehoiada, the son of Pasina. And I'm not going to read all those names. I'm not going to read all the names. But now we're at the third gate. Okay, Crew 10. Whoops. Crew 10. A Gibeonite and a Meronothite, men of Gibeah and of Mizpah. Okay, I don't know if a Moronite, I think there's a place called Moroni somewhere in Mizpah, so that might be 3 towns. It may be talking about the men of Mizpah, but anyway, again, it's folks coming from out of town to help that work from around Judah. Jerusalem meant more to the Jews than just the inhabitants of Jerusalem. I mean, it was all the Jews around were coming into the city to help with this work. And they worked until the throne of the governor on this side of the river, which I'm not sure what that refers to there in this midst. Let's look at the next crew. Crew 11, goldsmiths. Goldsmiths. I guess that'd be kind of like a jeweler or blacksmith. Interesting to me that there were goldsmiths in Jerusalem at that time anyway. But anyway, some kind of, and we're going to read about some other merchants too. But here we got the goldsmiths. Just think about the guy that would be the jeweler coming out of the jeweler shop. So I'm going to help with that wall. I'm not too good to help. I'm going to help. So he's doing what he can to take part of the work. Crew 12, the man that worked on the apothecaries, dealt in herbs, spices, medicines, or something of that sort. The pharmacist taking his apron off. I'm going to help. I'm going to be part of that work. And so they fortified Jerusalem to the broad wall. Crew 13. Here we have the son of Hur, Rephaiah. Who was Hur? Who? Who was Hur in the Bible? Yes, remember when Moses held his hands up, Joshua was victorious over the Amalekites. And when his hands would drop, the Amalekites would be victorious over Joshua. So they said, Moses, sit down here on this rock. And there were 2 men. It was Aaron and Hur that held up the hands of Moses until Joshua defeated the Amalekites in the wilderness. It may have been that Hur, a son of Hur. He was somewhat of a hero in Israel. There's a book that Lew Wallace wrote named Ben-Hur, son of Hur, the novel of the 18th century. And that's who he's talking about. It was this famous character, Ben-Hur, in there was a son of, this is a fictional story, but son of that man that held up his hands. But anyway, a son of Hur, and he's a ruler of the half part of Jerusalem. Tells us something about the government. They had it divided up into districts some way. And so this man comes and he's involved in the work too with Crew 13. Crew 14. I didn't highlight this, but notice they're repairing over against his house. Over against his house. Verse 15. Another crew. Let's keep going. Crew 16. They repaired the other piece and the tower of the furnaces. Wonder what all that was about. Crew 17. Here's another ruler. Ruler over the half part of Jerusalem. He and his daughters. Now we've been talking about a bunch of men going out to work, but this guy, he had some good daughters. He said, my girls aren't too good for this. They got out there and worked with it too. Those women working alongside those men to get this wall built. Interesting that it mentioned him and his daughters there, isn't it? Crew 18 and 4th gate, the valley gate. Okay? Same kind of thing it says about them. 1,000 cubits on the wall into the dung gate. So crew 19, gate 5, the dung gate. That's where they dumped the garbage out of Jerusalem. It was a gate over the valley of Hinnom. There's people say that the valley of Hinnom was where all the garbage would be dumped. And so, have you ever been to the dump? Where the fire's always going? Where the rats are always running? Where you look over and they throw some dead animal out there, the worm's always chewing? Where the fire is not quenched and the worm dieth not. That was the valley of Hinnom. And when Jesus is talking about hell, He compares it to the valley of Hinnom. Okay, the dung gate there that they repaired. The gate of the fountain, that's gate 5. Crew 20, gate 5. Let's see what it says about them. He was a ruler, a part of Mizpah, it says. So there's some folks from out of town again. And the wall, I love this little description. The wall of the pool of Siloah by the king's garden and under the stairs that go down from the city of David. The city of David was a small part of what became Jerusalem, and it still recognizes the king's house. And interesting that the king had a garden there, didn't it? I'd like to go see the king's garden. I like gardens. Wonder what all they grew in their garden. I bet it was a lot of herbs, wouldn't you think? Right there in the city. I don't know. They may have grew some squash. They didn't grow pumpkins. That comes from America, doesn't it? Wonder what they grew in those gardens up there at the king's garden. Anyway, that's just interesting to me that the king had his own garden there in the city. All right, here's a Nehemiah. This is a different Nehemiah. So there's 2 Nehemiahs in Nehemiah, and here's one that's building a wall. He is the son of Azbuk. That's not the Nehemiah the name is, the book is named for. But interesting, there's another Nehemiah there. And here go the sepulchres of David in the pool that was made unto the house of the mighty. I'd love to get an archaeologist to describe that to us. And what are they talking about? There are books on archaeology that try to describe what these are, and I didn't go into all of that thing. But it's just interesting to learn something about the city of Jerusalem and how they piece all this together to explain it to us when they study this. Now here come the Levites, crew 22. That's the priestly tribe. Now all the Levites were not priests. We read about the priest at the beginning at the sheep gate. Well, about halfway around now, we're here at the Levites. And that's those that were not of the sons of Aaron, but that they're of the priestly tribe. And they're working on their part of the wall. Here's a ruler, the half part of Kaliah. He's got his name up there on crew 23. Crew 24 is his brother. And he's a ruler of the other half part of Kaliah. Got these 2 brothers that rule another village out there, and both of them show up to help there in Jerusalem and get that built. Crew 25, this is verse 19. We got the ruler of Mizpah. Another piece over against the going up to the armory at the turning of the wall. I probably should have taken that picture and put it up there. There's a place where the wall makes a 90-degree turn. And that's probably where that's talking about, where that wall just takes a 90-degree turn and works on around. So there to the turning of the wall. Now, after him, Baruch, the son of Zabiah, he earnestly repaired the other piece. He probably got the trophy at the end of all this, got the award for the hardest worker. Well, he's the only one that said earnestly repaired. Let me promise you, they all worked hard. But this fella must have really been a go-getter. He earnestly repaired the wall. The only one pointed out that worked that hard. And then again, we're back to Elisha, the high priest. Well, now we started with him at the sheep gate, but he's not working on his house. They've got this other fella. He's earnestly working there at the door of the house of Elisha, the high priest. So Elisha, instead of fixing the wall by his own house, is up here at the sheep gate, and this other fella's coming in to repair after him and take care of the part around his house there. All right, crew 27. Here we have them. Remember these guys? I told you, remember their names. They did double duty. Here we've got Meremoth, the son of Uriah, the son of Kos. I think that's about the second or third crew that we read about. Evidently, they not only worked over there, when they got that work done, they went and found something else to do. and did another part of the wall. Sometimes we think, well, that's not my job. That wasn't the way these fellows were working, was it? They saw, well, look, we got this thing finished up. What else can we do? And so Nehemiah says, well, go on up. Go down there to help them over there at that part. And so they go over there and do that. And they fix it from the door of the house of Elishama even to the end of the house of Elishama. That must have been a pretty big house. He got 2 crews working around his house to get all that done. I just think priests were held in high esteem in Jerusalem, and particularly the high priest. So he had him a pretty big house there in Jerusalem. Crew 28, the men of the plain. Here's some priests working, but then it also says the men of the plain. If you can imagine the Jordan River, you know where the Jordan River there is in Israel, and then you go out there to Jerusalem, that's the hill country. Jerusalem's in the hills. But then you get out of the hills and you get to the coastal plain, and it goes down to the Mediterranean Sea. That's where your flatter lands were. Your bigger farms were out there. They came up out of that plain, evidently, and came up into the hills to help them build that town. There's another, and look at there in verse 23. They're over against their house. Look at group 30. They're by his house. Everybody's sitting there working. Well, I'll take care of my... There's a lesson there. You know how the church is strong? You want the church to be strong, start at your house. Make your house strong. If each of us would make our house spiritually strong, think how strong the church would be when we all get together. So just that, there they are, all working, taking care of that's the work that's right there before them. Take care of your own house, and you do that part. All right, after him, another piece, another corner, crew 32. There's the king's high house, and it was near the court of the prison. I wonder if that's where the king did his high house. I wonder if that's kind of like the courthouse. That's where the king sat in judgment, right near the prison. Could have been. All right, let's go on. Look at this. Crew 33. Crew 34, gate 7. They dwelt in Ophel. That's another little town out there. And they're fixing the water gate toward the east at the tower that lieth out. The water gate. Do you remember the Watergate scandal in Nixon? I remember a guy on the radio pointing to the Watergate in the Bible and saying that was all a fulfillment of prophecy because the Bible talks about the Watergate. Well, it wasn't Skip. It wasn't Skip. That's the way people will do the Bible, They'll find something and think, well, it must be fulfilling prophecy here. And I heard a lot of people telling me how the prophecy was going to be fulfilled when Trump returned to the presidency. They've kind of backed off on that one now, because he didn't return to the presidency. But there's the Watergate there. It must have been a gate near a fountain where they got their water to supply the city. Here's the Tekoites again. We'd read about them earlier. So they're working on another part of the wall as well. Crew 36, gate 8, the horse gate. Okay? Not sure why it was called the horse gate, but we're working around these gates here. Crew 37, he's over there working on his house. Crew 38, the east gate. The keeper of the east gate. That's gate 9. Crew 39. Crew 40. Over against his chamber. Crew 41. Gate 10. There's the goldsmith's son. See, did we read about we read about the goldsmith earlier, didn't we? Well, he's got his son out there working in another part. The goldsmith's son And then here is gate 10 is gate Mifkad. Mifkad, that's how I'll pronounce that, Mifkad. Don't know the significance of that. But it's right back there at the last verse now, between the going up to the quarter under the sheep gate, so we've made it all the way around the wall. And who's there working? Well, the goldsmiths and the merchants out there working there. I made it all the way around, got all the way back around to the sheep gate. Well, interesting chapter, really, isn't it? I mean, it's a little tedious to read, and I didn't want to just sit here and read it to you. And I thought dividing it by crews and by gates be the best way to do that. There's 12 gates in Jerusalem. There were 12 gates. This only mentions 10 gates and made it all the way around the city. Why do you think they would only mention 10 gates if there were 12 gates? What would you think? Yeah, 2 of them already in good shape. I bet that's exactly right. They didn't have to repair. They had 2 gates probably that they just, well, that one's all right. We can let that one be, and we'll work on these other gates. So that's probably the best answer. That is the answer that the commentaries gave. You ought to write a commentary. And you know, they know as much about it as we do, probably. They're probably guessing that too. You read these commentaries, and I have learned that sometimes they write so confidently about things, they're really just kind of, they're guessing as well as I can about it. And some of them are honest enough to say it may be because of this, but some of them just go out and tell you. And so take it with a grain of salt when you read that. Okay, so we made it all the way around Jerusalem, and that brings us to the end. So, you have gone through Nehemiah chapter 3. I'm going to bring this up again Sunday morning about the challenges of building that wall. And one of them is simply the logistics of how you're going to do this. How do you manage over 40 crews at one time? They've got to have the materials. They've got to have provisions. You can't expect folks to eat, work like that and not eat. You've got to provide for them. And then they had to be defended. He had to provide for their defense. I'll tell you something else I'm going to point out Sunday morning. And you don't read about this till you get to Nehemiah chapter 6. That wall had been torn down by Nebuchadnezzar. And depending on who you're looking at, it's 120 years or 180 years it laid in ruins. You know how long it took them to build that wall? 52 days. He got 40 crews out there, built that wall in 52 days. I mean, it's just astounding what Nehemiah was able to accomplish. And even the enemies saw what happened and realized the hand of God had to have been with them to pull that off. Okay, we'll talk about that Sunday morning. I'm going to talk about Nehemiah chapter 5, but I'm going to kind of bleed, 4, but I'm going to kind of bleed all over this thing and pull all that together about the challenge that they had in building that wall.